Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to start my previews of the upcoming by-election test for Boris Johnson, also Keir Starmer, arguably. There is an election this week for a seat in Westminster. It's a very safe Conservative seat, and that spells danger for the Prime Minister. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, due to the former Conservative MP, James Brokenshire, who sadly died in post, there is to be a by-election this Thursday. Now, Brokenshire was an immensely popular figure locally, I gather. So, it would have been a very, very tough ask for Labour to take this seat under normal circumstances. I mean, it still is. But let's say this had gone to a general election next year and Brokenshire was still in post. You really wouldn't have had Labour targeting this seat, I don't think. But as the local voters won't necessarily know much about the new Conservative candidate, it is possible that they will consider party political issues more deeply rather than, well, this MP always backs us up, because they don't know that about the new one. Now, don't get me wrong, I've seen nothing that suggests that we're going to see an upset here. I don't think I'm going to be there on Friday going, wow, what happened there? It's possible, but I do want to consider the consequences of all three possible results. Now, the first possibility is that the new candidate, Louis French, wins with a handsome margin. It doesn't need to be the 64% of the votes that Brokenshire achieved in 2019. Frankly, it doesn't even have to be above 50%. As long as it is probably significantly 10% ahead of the Labour tally of the votes, then the Conservatives can breathe easy. You know, Labour will argue that they've cut the majority, but the Conservatives will argue it's a by-election. The voting pattern is not the same as it is for general elections, which is true. You know, you do tend to get a higher proportion of anti-government voting in a by-election, you know, as a warning to the party in power. Oh, don't you take us for granted now. You know, but this is a warning that's not always followed through at the general election itself. The second possibility, this is the tantalising one, is that we actually do get a shock of shocks and that Labour win the seat. There is a full list of candidates, including the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, but Lib Dem leader Ed Davey has said that he's not focusing resources on this by-election. His focus is on North Shropshire in a couple of weeks. That's on the 16th. This might well mean that Labour find themselves as the main challenger, with other parties maybe paying lip service. They're standing a candidate but not really trying very hard. I don't know. It also has to be said that local canvassing by the media is turning up a lot of 2019 Conservative voters deeply unhappy with Boris Johnson. Remember that a very safe Tory seat was lost in a by-election this year to the Liberal Democrats. Now, it wasn't as safe as this one. It wasn't as big a swing as Labour would need to take it. This week's by-election is definitely a bigger ask. One dark horse in all this, to bear in mind, is Reform UK. This is the rebranded Brexit party. It's still run by Richard Tice, and the chairman himself is running in this by-election. It's not just that they're putting up a candidate. Tice himself is running, and they've hit the campaign trail in this constituency hard. They've really gone all guns out on it, according to reports. They don't present themselves as right-wing, of course, but they're comprised of Tories and former Tories, and their policies reflect this. As a result, although they do cost Labour votes, they cost the Conservatives way more votes. So all things considered, they are a net hindrance to the Conservative candidate and a net help to the Labour candidate. How much is not clear. But they are going all out on this one. Now, I've got my ideas about exactly why Reform UK exists, for which I may discuss separately later on, perhaps in a review of the by-election if the results are interesting enough. But could they flip the seat? Could be the difference? If they can, then we are surely going to see something akin to panic amongst Conservative MPs. Because consider what it means. It would mean that they have lost safe seats in the south of England to both the Liberal Democrats and Labour. And that's without even considering North Shropshire in a couple of weeks. And everyone would know the reason as well. Boris Johnson's failure to govern. It's not, you know, the Lib Dems and Labour suddenly resonating much better with the public. This is Boris Johnson's failure. What we're seeing from canvassing is that people are upset with the sleaze scandals. They are upset with the failure over social care reform. They are upset with the broken promises over investment in railway infrastructure. There are also a lot of elderly voters in the area that's going to the polls this week. Old Bexley and Sidcup. I mean, I suppose there are often a lot of elderly people in Tory seats, but they're not happy with the broken promise over the triple lock to pensions. So if Labour won, it would send shockwaves through Westminster. And when I say this is a safe Tory seat, I don't just mean that it's had a strong majority for a while now. I mean it's always been Conservative. It has a Conservative population. It's just naturally like that. And it has done for decades. You know, if it switched to Labour, there would be a lot of Conservative MPs who currently think themselves safe who would have to reevaluate. Because to go from, like, you can sort of understand, because the Conservatives are not at all moderate at the moment, you know, swinging to the Liberal Democrats is one thing. But if it was a Conservative area was to swing to Labour, a lot of Conservative MPs would feel very, very nervous. You know, it would also make the calls for Boris Johnson to step down much louder, notwithstanding what I'd already discussed yesterday about the SNP's motion. There are already reports that some Tory MPs have submitted letters to signal their lack of confidence. Not a significant number at the moment. I don't expect it to be a significant number anytime soon. It's also worth bearing in mind there is no value in getting to the required 15% of Tory MPs to submit those letters unless there's over half that would vote against him. Because if a vote of no confidence is triggered and Boris Johnson wins, that is a vote of no confidence as Conservative leader, not the separate one as Prime Minister, he's safe for a full year. Can't trigger another one for another year. So it may well be that there are already enough Conservative MPs want to him God now, but they're waiting to make sure that there's enough to actually vote him out. It would also do Labour a lot of good as well if this result went like this. Like after the failure in Hartlepool, which had been turning Conservative for a while, the council had already flipped, but they changed their strategic team. It worked much better in Batley and Spen, where Labour won. Now, I'm not just saying, oh, of course, you could tell the strategic team worked better because they lost in Hartlepool and won in Batley and Spen. It's not the result so much. It was the fact that the people working on the ground said that it works much better. But this will be a challenge and a half for them. That being said, the prospect of Labour winning this seat, unlikely, it's not impossible. Several top Conservatives, including Boris Johnson and Theresa May, have apparently been spending time in Old Bexley and Sidcup drumming up support. There's a major push by the Conservatives on this one. A major push. They're taking nothing for granted. Their candidate, Louis French, has also tried to sidestep the sleaze issue by promising not to take a second job as MP. You know, a Labour victory would be a major boost to Starmer's Labour around the country. It will help people to see him as someone taking on the Tories. His performances at PMQs and in interviews is one thing, and he's stepped those up recently, particularly in interviews. But those are words. You know, they'll resonate with some people and not others. If Labour take this safe Tory seat, people around the country will go, hey, what's going on here? If he can take that seat, can he take others? It's the sort of thing that can encourage apathetic anti-Tory voters who will go, there's no point in me turning up, it's not going to make any difference, to suddenly go, ooh, something could change here. This could be interesting at the next general election. A victory here would be immense. And I don't want to say it would be curtains for Johnson. I still get the impression he's got another potentially half a year before he loses the trust of Tory MPs altogether. But a loss would make it much harder for him to last beyond next spring. Then there's the third outcome, which is probably the most likely. The Conservatives hold the seat, but with a massively reduced majority, maybe even less than 10%. Now, the political impact of that would be a mix of good and bad. It wouldn't be bad for Labour as such, because there's no way that they should be winning this seat. You know, this is a free shot for Labour. In fact, it could still make Tory MPs in left-say seats very nervous if Labour pushed them even close this week. But like I said, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens are also standing candidates. Now, if people look at the situation, and I've talked about this quite a bit as well on the old Alliance front, if people looking at the numbers and going, well, if the Lib Dems and the Greens had stepped aside, then why didn't they do that? You know, so expect Friday to be full of complaints from people, not necessarily completely unreasonably, asking why more wasn't done to get behind just one anti-Tory candidate. It would also provide a boost to Starmer, heap more pressure on Johnson, even if the Conservatives ultimately win. Not as much as if Labour actually wins it, but a close result will be an indication that Labour are getting through to dissatisfied Conservative voters, either converting them or at least persuading them to just not vote Tory. That might mean not voting at all. You know, many voters may just stay at home this week. They often do in a by-election anyway. You know, unable to vote for the Conservatives because of Boris Johnson, but not abandoning their Conservative politics completely and voting for, you know, Labour. It would also put pressure on Johnson. The result in 2019 was 3 times as many votes for the Conservatives as second-placed Labour. If Labour can even come close to overturning that, even if they don't quite make it, then you'll have MPs who'll be looking, well, I usually get twice as much as Labour or the Lib Dems, whatever, and that's quite healthy. That's quite comfortable. Now they'll be looking at you thinking, a seat where they get 3 times as many was nearly flipped. My twice as many doesn't look that good anymore. And they will realise they are no longer safe. And imagine what it will mean for MPs where the result was already close in 2019, where it was already a bit iffy. They will already have had to come to terms with the fact voters who voted Tory in 2019 to get Brexit done won't have the same reason to vote for them again. If they also lose voters due to the corruption scandals, the broken promises and the lies, all of which Labour are pushing very hard now, then they may not be minded to give Boris Johnson much more time at all. Consider that they are not getting ready for an election in 2024. In their mind, they want an election sooner, definitely by 2023, ideally next year. But that's unthinkable if seats like this can be pushed close. It would make the Conservatives look very vulnerable. It would energise non-Tory voters who stayed away in 2019. And then imagine what would happen if the Liberal Democrats pushed the Conservatives close in North Shropshire. Again, Lib Dems don't even have to win that seat in 2 weeks' time, just push them close. Because that's another extremely safe Tory seat. And what if the Lib Dems did win that one? What if Labour win this week, the Liberal Democrats win in 2 weeks' time? I think it would be a fair bet that Johnson's Christmas would be well and truly knackered. But one election at a time. Those are my thoughts ahead of this Thursday. Might be something interesting to say on Friday. Maybe not. Who knows? Time will tell. But until then, I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.